You know, and another way that I say it in my dissertation work, Jesus is not a religious icon to be venerated, but the human prototype to be replicated.
Right. Which is yes, definitely a distinction that bears repeating as much as we can, because that's
Mhm.
not how it's generally looked at.
It's not like believing in Jesus that and something good will happen for you, you know. It is really being in Jesus and becoming, as Martin Luther put it, like Christ, a
Yeah,
little Christ.
it's like Jesus saying, "Look what I did. You can too."
That's right.
Welcome back. What if the pain you're avoiding is the very thing trying to awaken you? This is Olaf and Eric on EMP, where we explore the sacred path of personal transformation, not as a theory, but as a lived, embodied process. In this episode, we open the deeper architecture behind what mystics call the magnum opus, the four-stage journey of inner alchemy, and show how it mirrors the spiritual awakening happening inside of you right now. Emotional drop from hospital beds to heartbreak, from grief to God. This is not a detour. This is the sacred work. And the Christ you seek may already be waking up inside of you. So if you're feeling stretched, overwhelmed, or cracked by life, good. You're exactly where the process begins. Let's get to work. Welcome back to Olaf and Eric on Eric's Mindset platform. Today we're going to talk about some wonderful things Dr. Olaf brought along about the passions of the soul, the way of the heart. We're going to continue on with something I was working on about the. Of course, we're always talking about spiritual awakening
Sure.
and stress, and I'm going to bring in some different parts of that. The
Right.
magnum opus. Uh, it's called in Sufism. They like the great work.
Oh, that's what it
So I can touch
means.
on that. Yep. So away we go.
Yeah. Wasn't there a movie by one of my favorite stars? He was a music teacher, and his name Opus, his opus, his greatest. It became his greatest expression.
Yeah.
Um, so curious as to whether anybody out there listening, even at this moment, could say, "Well, I can make a claim to an opus in my life."
Yeah, well, hopefully, right? But I
You
do
know,
remember. Did you said the movie, right, with Richard Dreyfuss?
thank you, thank you.
Yep.
At my age, as I've said many times, you know, my the file in which all of the names of people
Yeah.
I've seen and heard and read, and people I've met, that file is the most irritating locked up file. So I said, you remember the movie,
Well, I'll tell you, I'm pretty much right there with you. I'll have to make some reference. You know that I'll say to my son. You know that movie with Batman in it, and it's like Batman. You're talking about Christian Bale is in this. Like, you know what I mean? So I have to
Yeah,
make weird references
sure.
to get to how to get to what we're talking about.
Yep.
But where to begin? Wh-
Well, do we want to begin also with a theme that I shared with you before we started this on healing and my little adventure again? So, folks, the thing about a hospital episode, which is what I'm talking about,
yeah.
and I got out of the hospital yesterday, which means Sunday afternoon, early afternoon,
Yeah, and still made it out.
uh, which was the third day after going into the hospital about Thursday noon.
Yeah.
You know. However, there was a day and a half of adventure of feeling so crappy. It was so COVID like that I thought, hey, I might be dying. Kind of nauseous, weak, that yucky feeling from inside, like I might barf,
Yeah.
but not, you know.
Yeah.
So that's an awful feeling. So went to urgent care. My temperature peaked to 103 for a while on Wednesday, then came down. So I just thought, this is kind of a purgation. of sorts. It's something I just have to go through,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Just a bad virus, right?
Yeah.
Because the symptoms were so clear, but not COVID, but a cousin of COVID came Thursday morning. I hadn't yet seen my full foot because I wore socks, and when it came to Thursday morning, saw red growing under first layer of my skin, the color red, starting to spread. Of course, a sign of infection. You know, right away rushed to the ER.
Sure.
Was in the hospital, leg up. What was really neat after the first treatment of the medicine right straight into my bloodstream, the symptoms were gone. So ironically, there I lay in the ER in the most vulnerable position. Who knows? Because this kind of condition might just go up the bloodstream, go right to the heart. I mean, people have been known to die depending on the character of the infection.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, they just knew it's an infection. We have to see what kind it is, its agency powers to attack, and so on and so forth. So, but the viral symptoms that I had been inflicted by for a day and a half were gone. So it was kind of like a relief to be in the ER.
Yeah.
You know, so phase one was sort of done, but now comes phase two, kind of the danger of what's really lurking in your stream.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the word cellulitis. And though people, I've been athletic all my life, and people who have the condition of athlete's foot, it's kind of a condition of toes and nails
Mm-hmm.
that highly active athletic type people have. And I've had them all my life, whether I play tennis or racquetball or hoops or whatever, walking, 12,000 steps a day.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, an infectious agent came in. I didn't recognize it in the early phases until redness and swelling started welling quite quickly. Full foot redness, the bottom half of the leg redness, And so what I learned is that red is kind of an angry color, that your body is angry at having, at having the attack, and it's mobilizing
Sure. As far as diagnosis is concerned.
agents
Sure.
to ward off the threat. So, folks, we have an army of bioagents ready to protect our well-being. I mean, the magic of our bodies, as well as our spirit and minds, is something to behold. But our bodies, at the same time, can be vulnerable. Both are true. We're remarkably strong and resilient. We're also remarkably vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get into that word in a little bit here. So, treatment process led to a color change on Friday. Any guesses out there? From angry red, and the way one doctor put it, an infection specialist, the healing purple. And it was a mixture. It wasn't pure purple, but a different kind of red, purple red. It's almost like purple rain.
Yeah. Well,
is a gain, is a grace.
Purple Rain. Yeah.
Bless the Prince. Really.
Prince?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Purple
Loved him.
Rain. Absolutely.
Loved his music. Yeah. Took my daughter there when she was 13
Yeah.
to a Prince concert.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! It was just magic,
Mm-hmm.
just magic, and the drummer woman started drumming, got us ginned up as the audience, and here I am, but it was like a religious event. Suddenly the lights go out, and then smoke comes from the stage, and then lights from underneath the stage, and then of course Prince is on a platform, and of course the audience, ironically, cheers so loudly that I can hardly hear his voice.
Right.
And then suddenly he comes up on the stage and starts his heart-moving, passion-stirring, life-giving music. I think one of the attractions of rock concerts is the different forms of energies that just feed our souls.
Sure.
The crowd energy, we're here. The togetherness energy. We're here to focus transcendently on someone who is offering one of the essential ingredients that feeds our human spirit, the arts, music, and of course rock. Rock is a form, not only of music, a way of life, an adventuresome way of life. So, and I'm not saying we elders should try to be rockers. If you truly are a rocker, I can tell the difference. A true elder rocker They have that rocker spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But back to my story. So the signs were slow but encouraging. On Friday, there was some talk about, will I be staying Saturday? We'll see. It is getting better, but it's still very tenuous. And this kind of, if the cellulitis were of the dark, deep, dangerous kind, there would have been a different result or a different fight. I'd be still in the hospital because the darker, deeper, or stronger cellulitis has a force that just, the attacking agents go up the bloodstream and can go to vital organs, and people die. People die from sepsis. You know, the infection gets away from the army inside and from the army outside that tries to prevent the enemy.
Sure.
And I know I'm speaking in kind of in images and poetry, but those are true feelings. If we really tune into our body and what's really going on in our soul, we can feel it. And those kinds of analogies or metaphors are apt, at least for me. At least for me. So on Friday night, I hardly slept. I was in deep meditation, a couple of hours, thinking about life, thinking about death. One of the principles of transcendentalism, Emerson and so on, is that mortality is our greatest teacher. Others have said it too. Mortality, the sense of our mortality, is a great teacher. And I was facing mortality where I was on the fifth floor, being able to see the sky and the tops of the trees, a kind of a healing room. And they allowed me to pace and walk when I needed to stretch because I was feeling okay, but my body was working.
Certainly.
So that night, one of the magic moments meditatively on the wall directly in front of me, sightwise from the bed, was one of those ascension symbols. Ascension of a brown, dark cross. The lengthy piece maybe being about 8 inches, the cross piece being about 5 inches. And attached to it, I wish I had taken a picture. I didn't. A silverine symbol of the resurrected Christ giving a blessing, not a crucifix, but the resurrected Christ giving a blessing. And I immersed into that symbol as if it were an icon. In the Eastern spirituality, they use the word icon because it is not just a symbol. It is a symbol that invites you beyond the surface to the essence of it, the energetic essence of it. And I went into the energetic essence of the aspect of suffering that we all have, symbolized by the cross. We all are challenged by suffering of one kind or another: infectious body suffering, hip change suffering, relationship broken suffering, alienation from children or parents or brothers or sisters suffering. We experience suffering. That is just part of life. And the image of the resurrected blessing Christ. And you know what I mean by Christ?
Sure.
I mean, this is the humanity of God. I know it's a weird way to
So no, I don't know what you mean by Christ. Are you
Yeah,
talking
I've said
about
it before.
Jesus or some other symbol for Christ?
Yeshua incarnates the humanity of God.
Okay, but Christ for me, this is a distinction that I'm going to have to stop you at. I don't want to interrupt your story, but
Okay.
Christ is a consciousness for me.
It's that too.
Christianity is Jesus the Christ.
It is a form
Christ
of consciousness.
It is a consciousness that you can come to, and this model is Jesus.
Yes, it is. We have the consciousness as we have the consciousness of creatures, territory, safety. We have the consciousness of God's humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Jesus to me represents the consciousness that we can have, or the Christ. But the Christ is not just that, if you will.
And Jesus is not the only one with the Christ consciousness.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right. And authors like Richard Rohr has a wonderful book called The Universal Christ.
Okay.
It's a gem, and he lays out what that means. That's in line with you and with this crossover that's happening right now narratively. Yeah.
Right.
But what I felt was the deep vulnerability of living, the deep vulnerability. But it didn't like lead to anxiety. It was like by icon, I mean, I immersed into the recognition, felt the energy, owned it. It wasn't just my body working hard to stay alive, but owned the fundament of our vulnerability and our inevitable suffering. And it wasn't like, now ask God, please help me out of this. It was the other way. It was like,
What do you mean?
accept it, move into it, and you meet the sacred in the vulnerability. It was like the word to me was, I am here. I am here in the vulnerability. I am here in the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a solution, a fix it. I am here. It was a connection to a way that is a pathway to sacred connection. And it is very interesting that in the record of the four gospels of Jesus in the Bible, what is agreed to be the earliest gospel, Mark. No Christmas story, no fancy beginning, just begins with this man saying, I've come to announce the good news. The realm of the sacred is near. The realm of, or put in traditional language, the kingdom of God is near. And what is the very first thing that Yeshua does? Heal. To be in the throes of the vulnerability, sickness, struggle, dynamic, is to be at the same time in the heart of the sacred struggle with us. And it became kind of a peculiar kind of, I don't want to use the word comfort. It was like it led to affirmation, but here's the key Buddhist term: acceptance. Acceptance of vulnerability, but that doesn't mean abdication to the sickness. The irony is acceptance that this is part of the whole design of things, and I will fight like hell for life.
Mm-hmm.
It is
we need to start to form a different attitude with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, it was of the many things that happened. One of the benefits of hospital visits, if you have time to really reflect and be with yourself, is the interruption. There's a book on that by a doctor. The stories or something we tell. One key dynamic that we have to come to terms with when we have serious illness from accident or organic threat or whatever is interruption. And sometimes
how do you mean exactly?
interruption of our patterns of life.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Well, I mean,
I actually imagine that, and I don't know, but I imagine that the average person nowadays is actually playing on their phone in their hospital bed the same as they do when they're at home or at work nowadays. So it's much less of an interruption. They're kind of doing the same thing.
Other than contact with colleagues or students or whoever, no, I did turn on the TV for news and so on and so forth, but it was also more reading and reflecting, meditating. But the magical moment was in the night of Friday. Learned Saturday, stay another day, and was graced to be far enough along to be released. So I did not have to interrupt our session.
So you're all right. I'm glad
I'm taking
you're all right.
oral pills, where that became a substitute for they call bolus, BOLUS. You have the vein access, and they come like with a syringe, and they put in stuff. And of course, they put in the agent to attack the infection.
Mm-hmm.
Every 8 hours. Put it in the healing liquid, and it has to work well enough. And the blood cultures have to show neutrality. In other words, there is still not an infectious tendency to get worse. Once the doctors feel comfortable with that, I have an oral regimen where I take a pill 4 times a day,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be for 10 days.
You're talking about the vulnerability,
Yeah.
and that goes with something else that you're talking about. Yeah, the wonder of our body and how it. You're talking
Oh,
about it, the
yeah.
red, and I started thinking, if you want to come to the kingdom, you must come like a child, and that is the epitome of it for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the sitting in wonderment,
Mm-hmm.
because it opens your mind, because we get away from the idea that I know about this, and I know, what I mean. We want to know. We feel more in control if we at very least act like we know. But it's quite the opposite. Where you get the most information and the most wisdom, and you learn the most, is when you're free to have that vulnerability and that
Yeah.
childlike wonderment of not knowing.
It's a child is open to more experience or new experience. Child is curious.
Mm.
A child has kind of an innocence in terms of no prejudgment. And one of the major facets of the ethic of Buddhism is when you meet other people, don't come with prejudgment. Drop prejudgment.
Mm.
Be open minded. Be open minded.
Well, and you can see how when you start with the prejudgment, then that judgment or that thought leads to whatever feeling that changes the
Mm-hmm.
physiology, and it changes the behavior, and it changes, how you're going to treat that person,
Absolutely.
and it changes the thoughts that you have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes how you stand, and how you, I would imagine it changes just many, many things that you give off. And there, it's going to limit what type of a outcome you can have in any type of interaction if you're walking in with judgment and the accompanying behaviors.
One of the facts of our humanity is that we are eternal child. We are continuing child. It reminds me of a woman psychologist who said in a day-long workshop many decades ago, she said, remember, in every adult, there is a scared 2-year-old.
Absolutely.
You know, it's
Not
that, and
everybody else, not me.
yeah,
No.
no, you're right. You're a scared 2.5-year-old.
That's right. That's right.
Folks, this is one strong dude, because one of the things that maybe I have a different look this today, because I have to stretch my left leg. I can't have it down on the floor. I have to have it straight. And what does Eric do? He comes in the room to fit something under the table to both stretch my leg and get me in the chair in a comfortable way. Brings this big heavy bolster, comes through the door. It's kind of like, who are you? Just so strong. I know you're been in construction and pool, work. I mean, so
Yeah, you're giving me, thank you. You're giving me
but I
too much
really
credit though, but thank you.
no, but folks, just a footnote. In so many ways over the recent years, I have experienced blue collar workers, different kinds, whether specialists or generalists, complain about disrespect. One of the great pains is how they are just disrespected by the managerial, the non blue collar middle class. I mean, I've heard that from young, aspiring blue collar entrepreneurs, middle aged stuff. Come on, folks. It's time to respect all kinds of workers. And one of the things, I become a very popular patient in hospitals, believe it or not, because I've been on the other side. I've been a chaplain, and I've run a chaplaincy department. So I know what it's like to be on one side, and I would also like to be on the other side, working with nurses and doctors, and so on and so forth. And to treat any person with respect. And then let me give an example. Early in the morning of, I think it was Friday morning. Yeah, early Friday morning. Comes in this tall, younger guy, 30-ish. And he said, excuse me, just housekeeping. And as he was tending to the garbage can, I said, hello, hi. I'm Olaf, by the way. Oh, hi. And who are you? It's kind of an invitation. The guy said, yeah, he could have just shrugged his shoulders and walked out. But he had this receptive smile of connection, the energy of connection, spirit to spirit connection. So, what's your story? In America, 7 months, working as in his housekeeping job for 6 months, has degrees and specializations in physical therapy, but he can't apply it because America has rules. You have to be certified. You have to carry a badge, to do physical therapy. Too bad you have that badge from another country, but we can't just transfer that. And he has 2 jobs, 2 full-time jobs. And why? To make at this lower level as much money as he can to send to family in Ukraine to help them. Every human being has this incredible narrative and story. But what we do is we judge them out. We categorize them out. We so narrow ourselves to these are the acceptable story of people to listen to. Folks, we are all that 2-year-old scared child. Folks, we are just fundamentally human. Can't we, enjoy the mutuality? I've learned so much from all different level. And then I talked meaningfully to a nurse with a master's degree, and it was just, when you treat your people who treat you like persons, if there's any way to connect, wow.
Well, okay, I agree with that sentiment. We'll have to get on to the value that we promised at the beginning of the show. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
we're just
I know,
doing what we promised. So,
amen. Thanks.
But I definitely always enthralled in your stories as well. Okay, you tell the most beautiful stories, and I was just gonna say I agree with the sentiment that you were saying.
Yeah.
About treating construction workers well. But I was gonna say on the other side of that, you can't control how other people are. Hold yourself well. Hold yourself in a way that holds respect, not arrogance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand that there's the how it goes with construction workers, and I understand how they hold themselves a lot of times, and hold yourself in a way that demands respect. And that's what I would say with that, with anybody, not just them. But yeah, everybody deserves that respect. You're human beings. You're not just in an idealistic way, but in a very real way. My perception of the world is that the witness that is both within and within the body, but also contains everything. In my perspective, it is the stage on which everything plays out. Is the same witness in you at the deeper level in a fractal geometric pattern, just like the veins on a tree go all the way back to the trunk. And so this is you're treating, and psychologically as well. I think it's Jungian theory. Perception is projection. Is that how you look at the outside world is actually just a perception of yourself. You don't actually see other people as they are. Of course, you see projections of yourself.
Yeah,
and,
and transcendentalism, which is, one of the religious movements by way of Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson and others, and Thoreau, really emphasize that perception, interpretation. But here's the magic: changing perception and changing your interpretation can change the impact of the whole situation. It's how we frame things. Again, Gestalt psychology gets into the play here. As is the glass half empty? You perceive that and you emphasize that, and the energy of that. What's that going to do to you? The glass is half full. You perceive that, the energy of that. What are you going to do? And that's a very simple illustration of, not only how we perceive, how we interpret, but how we frame things that is more toward the negative or toward the positive.
Absolutely.
So now, I've been bouncing the ball a heck of a long time, and so the ball is in your court, so to speak. And as you said, let's get to another.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You got me really excited about the stuff that you brought. And your story, there's a lot of, don't get me wrong. There's so much richness and underlying meaning in the stories that you tell. Is very much appreciated. Well, okay. If I'm going to take the ball for a couple minutes, then we'll continue on with what we were talking about spiritual awakenings. It's a persistent theme. That's that's what we're going on, is spiritual awakening as a persistent theme in the show. And we talked about stress, and we're talking, and that was something that it took me so long to deal with and figure out, and to realize that it was part of this decades-long spiritual awakening that you go through step by step, and whatever
Yep.
that means for you, whether exactly. But it's coming to recognize who you are, and that your source is, I say, divinity, or more of a spiritually connected source over time, as opposed to this just egoic character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I recognize it, and not only me, but others recognize it as also coming to recognize yourself as the divine, and you got to be careful with this one because our language doesn't phrase it right, but as God Himself. And I don't want to get into that discussion because our
I get
language
it.
doesn't do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but at the source, yeah, I see it like a fractal geometry. You
Mm-hmm.
are no different. You just believe that you are. Again, I know I'm like saying, "Hey, shut up! Only my opinion." I'm not saying that. I'm
No,
just
no,
saying,
no, no. I get it, and you know that I concur in part.
yeah.
Trinitarian model gives room for really seriously saying yes to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspects are very important counterparts to a problem if that's the only yes.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe like it's just the basic philosophy of everything is God, the
Mm-hmm.
one, the universe, the everythingness
And that
is the
would also
divine.
get into that speaks a little bit from this sheet too, what we're talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to go into that right now. So
Right.
stay with your.
We'll stay with the magnum opus, which is, so this plays into stress in spiritual awakening, because the magnum opus, it's the great work, it's called. It's you
Right.
see it in essentially, this is Western, it's alchemical, it's Christian mysticism.
Right.
You see versions of this in other philosophies, which we'll get into over time, but this is Christian mysticism. The magnum opus, the great work of transformation. We'll go back to the top. The magnum opus, or great work, is the central spiritual and philosophical goal in Western alchemy. Originally aimed at the creating the philosopher's stone, it became a symbolic map of the transformation of self, a
Mm-hmm.
blueprint for psychological, emotional, and spiritual evolution. So it's historical roots, and this is getting a little off, but we'll just poke this in there. In medieval alchemy, it was a laboratory process to transmute base metals into gold. That was alchemy. In esoteric and Jungian psychology, it reflects the transformation of the base aspect of the psyche into the integrated wholeness, which is, I can definitely see that. In
Mm-hmm.
mysticism, it parallels the soul's purification and union with the divine. This is the idea behind alchemy. The four stages of the magnum opus, though variations
Mm-hmm.
exist, some systems list 7 or 12. The most widely recognized classical model includes 4 stages, each associated with a color, psychospiritual process, and a symbolic theme. Nigredo, the blackening, would be the first step. And, you have steps within steps. It's not just necessarily chronological order. It goes in a little bit, in my experience. The blackening, dissolution, shadow work, death, and chaos would be the key words. First, you must die, or first, your ego must die before
That's
you can be
crucial. Ego
reborn.
death.
Yeah. This is the initiation into the work, often triggered by crisis, loss, or disillusionment. Old identities, attachments, or illusions are broken down. It's a period of confusion, grief, and inner darkness, but essential. Psychologically, it corresponds to the shadow integration and confronting the repressed aspects of the self. Modern equivalents: the dark night of the soul, dark night of the soul, ego death, and breakdown leading to breakthrough.
And that also is very well reflected in what happens in the first 3 or 4 steps of AA or 12-step recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Or 12-step recovery is right in line with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea behind this is that, that stress and that grief and that disillusionment,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, when we're talking about aging, it's good to understand from a medical perspective. Not that I really like the medical profession, not the people in it, but the philosophies behind it. But um, to understand from a medical perspective the stages of life, because then you're not 60 comparing yourself to what you
Mm-hmm.
were at 15 or 20. The idea is that you're going through this stress, but you also have this inkling or this deep knowledge that there is this spiritual awakening happening. This is to reinforce the idea that, hey, that's part of the process. You're on the way, kid. You
Yep.
know, this is part of it.
But this is also hard to accept and move into. And that's where people back off, but they back off into their egotism, their self-destructive patterns, or their stuckness,
In my
whatever.
Yeah, in my experience, the more that you back off, the more that if your soul is ready for it, the pain will increase, the discomfort will increase, in some ways exponentially, until you go through the steps that you have to go through.
Again, the grace of the pain.
Yeah,
The grace of the pain, just like I experienced the grace of the pain for 3 days.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And you surrendered to it.
yeah, we are vulnerable to it, but the irony is, don't avoid it, move into it.
Yeah,
And there are Zen practices that says, the way you deal with pain is you accept and move into it.
well, this is not to.
Don't fight it, shove it. But that I don't want to deviate from your.
Well, no, and I'm
too
not
much
giving
from this.
medical advice, but at the same time, yeah, we are in sort of a painkiller type of quick fix culture still. And so I think more of us, though, are recognizing that, yeah, the experience is there for a reason. It's there to help you grow, not because you're broken, not because there's something wrong with you. That comes back to trust in God and trust in life,
Absolutely.
as opposed to the way we treat things is that you need all of these medications because life is out to get you. Your body's out to get you. That pain means something's wrong with you, and so you understand the sentiment I'm getting at without trying to over-explain.
Yeah. Trust in life, trust in your body, trust the pain that has the backside of the gain. That you move into the vulnerability, you move into the core of the suffering, and the sacred is there.
Right. Albedo, the whitening. Purification keywords are purification, clarity, insight, illumination. The light begins to dawn after the long night. Description: following the death of the old self comes a cleansing. The psyche is purified. You begin to discern truth from illusion, ego from soul. Dualities are reconciled, and clarity emerges. This stage invites self-honesty, compassion, and forgiveness. The modern equivalents would be therapy, some sorts of therapies, and inner clarity, meditation breakthroughs, spiritual purification, and self-love. But really, I think we have these. Again, this isn't just a one-time deal. This is a cycle that happens in my perspective, in my experience, over and over and over again in smaller and larger ways, where we have this this cleansing that comes after the suffering.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, it's,
and that is part of our journey, and it repeats in different ways. It sort of recycles. But it's all meant to move us forward as a soul to a deeper enlightenment, deeper compassion, capacity to make a positive difference in the world.
Absolutely. Citrinitas, the yellowing. Keywords: awakening, wisdom, integration, inner gold, the rising sun of the inner world. Citrinitas is the dawning of higher consciousness. The purified self begins to integrate intuitive wisdom, spiritual truth, and conscious power. There's a move from inner clarity to outer action. The soul starts to express itself more fully in the world. So, modern equivalents: soul alignment, creative flow, visionary insight, and leadership from integrity.
And you see that same movement that happens with the followers of Jesus in the scripture, and that's also the movement, in many different religious systems. After the first two, then comes the empowerment to really be of difference to others, and the impulse to want to act, It's not feeling like now I'm demanded upon. But as you said, it's a higher consciousness that consequates into creative action, into compassionate action, constructive action. And that's really the kind of thing that needs to happen, especially in our country,
Mm-hmm.
with our split egoistic divisions and
Yeah.
our antagonisms and hostilities.
Well, there is after that cleansing, and it is sort of that. For me, I see it as like that relief period, just like
Mm-hmm.
and then there is a new element of wisdom that
Yes,
comes in after that,
yes.
where you feel more connected, and life makes sense, and you're
Oh,
recognizing the wisdom and the growth that
yeah,
you've just
yeah.
earned, and you recognize why you had to go through that process, and the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of it, and the and that you had to go through it.
And people in kind of the yellowing stage in 12-step treatment experiences that I was privileged to be a part of and facilitate. One of the simple ways that people express what you just said is, I am glad for all that happened because of I'm here.
Mm.
It's not like I'm glad for the pain per se, but in the here of being in this place of yellow consciousness, to use your terminology, you know, the wisdom, a clarity about what life is about. I know what it's about. You know, there was like a bit of recognition that all of the pain and the struggles and the reversals and et cetera, part of the whole journey. And they can just say, I'm glad for all of it because I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely,
As a result, I'm here.
absolutely. That's it. That's how I got here. Yeah, that's what it took. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it wasn't easy.
No, no.
Right, it wasn't easy, and I didn't know I was gonna make it most of the time, but here I am.
I knew. I trust the process. I knew. I trusted the process.
Rubedo, the reddening. Keywords: wholeness, embodiment, union, completion, the marriage of opposites, the red king and the white queen. The final stage, the union of spirit and matter. The self is no longer divided. You live from the soul outward. Purpose, love, and action align. The philosopher's stone is symbolic of this transmutation. Not an object, but a state of being. Modern equivalents: living in purpose, divine embodiment, the mystic as leader, healer, or teacher. You've truly
Mm-hmm.
embodied. You're not.
Yeah.
I always think of it as like you've when you take the mystical path, you can sort of you're exploring all sorts of things that are way outside the realm of what people are used to. So you can almost feel flaky or out there
Yes.
at times, depending on what you're into at the moment.
Right.
And however, when you earn it and you come into a maturity with what you've been working on,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different thing because you have earned this thing that most people haven't. I mean, this happens in all different areas of life for people, but
Right.
it's the same in this
Mm-hmm.
area.
Yeah, we're all in the process. We're in a journey and the process of growth. And we are becoming. We're not just being. But we can easily lose this path by selling out to a market mentality of this is the way to be, and all of the images from the phone screen and computer screen and TV screen. The kind of the marketized uh, creature, externalized, marketized, exteriorize yourself, and now make yourself happy according to the market criteria.
Well, that's exactly what it does. And we confuse that. It might take we teach our children
Mm-hmm.
that this is how you should be, and this is what you got to do to get it. And it's against our nature. That's why we for the most part don't do these types of things. Most people don't attain this wealth that they're told to go after, and don't achieve these statuses, and don't achieve these different things that is put in their head. But because it's against our finer nature, as opposed to helping people, which is, part of the goal of this show, is helping people to see that it's built in. The instruction manual is built in.
Right.
I remember that show, The Greatest American Hero. It was a 1980s TV show where this guy finds this suitcase in the middle of the desert with a superhero outfit, and in the intro it shows where he's carrying the thing under his arm, and the instruction manual falls out. And so the show, it was a cheesy 80s TV show, but it was the idea was like, okay, he had this superhero outfit and he could help fight crime and things, but he didn't really know how to use the superhero outfit, so it doesn't really work in his favor a lot of the times. And so I think of like that's how we treat being a human being. We're dropped into this body, but there's no instruction manual. And there's too many instruction manuals, and they can all conflict.
Okay.
And so but the idea is to look inside. Those answers were put within you. What are your passions, which we have to get into.
Yeah.
And those answers are within.
Yeah. And what you've shared in this model, these 4 steps or stages, is not like some kind of model that's imposed like a cookie cutter from outside to shape you.
No.
It is expressive of the natural human journey and the necessary components of the deepening spiritual growth that we are meant to experience and in a sense to complete. Because as we truly redden, then we become truly a beneficent, salvatory, transformative force in the world.
Absolutely. Yes. Well said.
Christ consciousness is embodied in that.
Speaking of which, and we'll just to close this out, we don't have to go through all these little charts and things, but a final reflection. Speaking of which, Christ consciousness right there. Final reflection, the magnum opus is not a linear journey, but a spiraling path. We may revisit each stage many times. It offers a powerful framework to understand personal transformation, not as pathology, but as sacred process. Let's break it down clearly and honestly, showing how the magnum opus aligns with the path of becoming Christed. And this is just a quick idea about the comparison between the magnum opus and Christ consciousness. So the magnum opus and the path of the Christ consciousness in Christian mysticism, the life, death, and the resurrection of Jesus is not only a historical event, it's also a template for the transformation of the soul.
That's right.
The stages of the magnum opus mirror this process almost exactly, especially when viewed through the lens of inner alchemy or Gnostic Christianity. In mystical Christianity, Christ isn't just a person, Christ is a state of being. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Colossians 1:27. The magnum opus is essentially the process of becoming a Christed being, not worshiping Jesus, but becoming like him.
Right.
Living from the I am within, acting as a vessel for divine presence on earth. Jung's take, individuation and the Christ archetype. Carl Jung, who deeply studied both alchemy and Christian symbology, saw Christ as the archetype of the integrated self, the full reconciliation of opposites within us, human and divine, body and spirit, light and shadow. The magnum opus in Jungian terms is the individuation process, and the end goal is wholeness, not perfection, which is precisely what the Christ symbol represents. Integration, becoming a living temple. Becoming like Jesus doesn't mean perfection in the moralistic sense. It means living in union with God, from John 17:21. Loving from overflow, not obligation. Serving from a deep inner knowing, acting as a bridge between spirit and matter. This is Rubedo. This is I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Galatians 2:20. And is also the philosopher's stone, not a magical object, but the transformed self, who now radiates divine presence. So yes, it's more than accurate to say that the magnum opus, when understood spiritually, is the journey of becoming like Christ. It's the inner resurrection path open to anyone willing to walk through the fire.
Yeah, well laid out. I fully agree. As a Christian practical theologian by designation professionally, mystical Christianity in this respect is not like, well, kind of a mystical branch for those weirdo types. It is the model for us all. And another way that I say it in my dissertation work, Jesus is not a religious icon to be venerated, but the human prototype to be replicated.
Right. Which is yes, definitely a distinction that bears repeating as much as we can, because that's not how it's generally looked at.
It's not like believing in Jesus that and something good will happen for you. It is really being in Jesus and becoming, as Martin Luther put it, like Christ, a little Christ.
Like Jesus saying, "Look what I did. You can too."
That's right. But in your context, in your way, in your terms, not in a religious. See, what religions can do is be kind of like we are the God box. If you want to meet God, you have to come into our box and play according to our rules and agree to our game and our language and so on and so forth. It's like they are reversing where God is God at work in all of us, in every human being, in all of us. And those who develop, kind of a fundamental understanding that may empower people toward this path and truth. Yes, okay. If your box does that, really does help to transform people into the Christ consciousness, yes. But unfortunately, religions can sometimes become like entities unto themselves. Box in God. Box in God.
When we talk about Jesus or Jesus Christ, we tend to think, okay, this is the idea that this one guy came down, and that's the embodied God. I suppose is the
That's
idea,
the
but
old
that's
narrative.
that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But the only part missing is, so are you. That's the part missing. So are you. And to become that fully realized being is the idea. Is that agreeable?
Yes, we're in controversial territory in terms of people trying to understanding what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's and what we are saying is Jesus can become too much a separate deity of sorts. And if you believe in that deity, you will benefit whatever the benefits are from that deity. And that is not really the incarnation model, Jesus the Christ consciousness model. It is not a deity, that is separated from humanity. It is the expression of our essential humanity that is a continued journey into transformative realization. And I have experienced these stages. I'm not going to get into it. Every one of your stages has kind of, well put, erudite language, but they really are expressive of a dynamism that is the true dynamism of our journey in Christ into Christ consciousness.
Right. What explains this journey into Christ consciousness? What are you referring to? The like biblical teachings and things like that, or
the whole religious panoply.
Okay, yeah, it's the journey. It's right. It is the journey. It is that is mystical Christianity. That's reading the Bible as this is the journey into this Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of historical accuracy in any particular part of it. I mean, I would think that there's a gullibility factor if you think that that's what it's all for entirely. But at the same time, there's no reason to say that, historically these things didn't play out because they do every day in different ways.
Yeah. Well, let me just say something about, from the theology of religions comes, I think I might have said this before, comes a kind of a model of what are the different factors about a religion. But the critical are the first two: experience of sacredness and the narrative. But what can easily happen is people begin to put the emphasis on the narrative, and that's like a God box. Now come into, ascribe to this narrative, and you will be. Well, does the narrative facilitate the experience? Going back to this process, the experience involves this darkening and enlightening, and then the strengthening, and finally the discipling. You can say many different ways of this 4-step journey, but it's very classic. It's very real, and what we are doing is moving from the extrinsic institutionalized narrative emphasis to the intrinsic experience in life, not institutionalized ex- experience. I don't know if I'm making sense. I know
Mhm.
my brain is a little bit affected from after
Yeah.
the 3-day hospital
Well, that
visit.
was a
So
lot.
pardon me for lack of clarity. If
Yeah.
when you edit it, say, "What is he saying?" You know, you can just say, "Oh, we can just extract that or whatever." You know, I'm sort of feel like I'm muddle minded
Well,
or
it's
sufficiently
understandable.
energized.
Yeah.
And this is part of my life purpose, and you have given me the opportunity to do that. So the, the sacred works with me through circumstances, through people, as well as through my own soul center, heart center inclinations.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tripartite voice: circumstance, community, and soul center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful. I mean, you really bring a soul and just wonderful content to this project together. So it's
Yeah.
very much. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All sorts of wonderful stuff right here. The passions of the soul. You're pretty hot about this one.
Yeah, I would say that's the one, because it kind of goes well as a parallel, to what we're talking about. Um, but I wouldn't say this is another way of saying the same thing. This is sort of a humanistic, psychological understanding of how spirituality can become kind of a hybrid with humanistic psychology.
Mm-hmm. Just,
And
I'm sorry, quickly. This is from Passion. I'm gonna have to look up how much of this we can actually show, but this is from Passion for Life. Who wrote this
the
book?
passion, I think it's Bob and Muriel James. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, but
Um,
it's from the book Passion for Life.
yes,
Yeah.
Passion
Okay.
for Life
Right.
by the author by both of them have the last name of James,
Got you.
and I think it comes from the 70s or 80s. You can look into it. So,
Okay.
but I think for the aspect of time, we could begin with 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 this kind of the summary statement, and then um, each of those aspects have content, like the urge to live, the basic urge. Um, when I went to the hospital, it sort of highlights my urge to live. Not in a scared way. I want to live. I want to live. But it's when something that is you take for granted is precious day in and day out, and when it is like attacked, undercut, and maybe threatened, we sort of recrystallize the value of this fundamental drive. And the essence of a full, complete life, psychologically, humanistically, Christologically, spiritually, is to choose and to love life.
Mm-hmm.
Choose it, love it, take responsibility for it. It's not an easy journey. It's
Right.
not for wimps.
Right.
So hence courage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just a quick side note, you get to see all the wonderful markup. Every book that I've ever seen that Dr. Olaf owns comes with this wonderful notation. So this is I'm very familiar with this notation. Yes. So this is where you're looking at, right? The urges of the
Yeah, I
human
am.
spirit.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
urges of the human spirit. You got it.
Would you like anything read from it?
Well, with the capacity to generate power and passion, the urges are energy sources. Like coals of fire, they may burn brightly or motive us or die down if our spirits are low. Yet their potential energy is always there. It can be reignited. When we are in touch with these urges, they prod us to develop our potential and meet challenges. When we are out of touch with these urges, we become passive. Life seems mundane and boring. No, life becomes, in some sense, mundane and boring. And then when that happens, we fall trap to externalization. I know, drink more, party more, or buy more, or sex more. I mean, it's an invitation to addiction. There is a counter call, like, here's an urge to life. Our life is becoming boring and mundane. Here's another path, kind of an easy path to have some fun and to have alternate consciousness. But if it's induced by drugs or by, addictive behavior, it is faux. It's faux.
Right. Well,
It's death dealing, not life giving.
The addictive behavior, I would say, I mean, maybe not exclusively, but in the end, the addictive behavior is to fill a void
Yes.
that is left by the lack of fulfillment, which is
Right.
created
Yep.
by a suppression of those urges and those passions.
Mhm.
And so that's all you're left with. You're left with these perverted behaviors because they're acting out in ways that they haven't been direct. Those energies have not been directed in fruitful ways.
Yep.
But that's a wonderful idea, though, because at the core, the
Mhm.
core of what's causing these, perversions and misbehaviors is something wonderful that waits to be explored.
Yes. In a ill direction, not life enhancing, but death dealing direction. There is the call from the sacred. There is the other way. There is the other way. The dynamism of the sacred, trying to, through the pain, realize a different path for gain. But the closing paragraph, although capable of being distorted, good, that's perfect. Being distorted and used in destructive ways, the universal urges of the human spirit are basically positive and life enhancing. They stir us to begin a spiritual search for meaning. They constantly urge us to grow, to live more authentically, be aware of what's important, and to increase our commitments to a life of meaning. We are born with these 7 basic urges: to live, to be free, to understand, to enjoy, to create, to connect, and to transcend. And what I suggest is jumping to this
The bottom?
from that, yeah. Instead of going into each one separately, go to there. The value of the model is not only the validity of each urge. I mean, think of it, folks who are watching and or listening at this moment. Think of you, your life, your spirit. What energizes you? Isn't it just these? I mean, you may say it more, there's some other things, but these are core urges that are highlighted, by, I think it's Bob and Muriel James. And they come from the whole field of the transactional analysis, but more than just, on a therapeutic level. And do we not all want to be free? Free to do our way of living, living out our truth? Do we all seek to understand more deeply what are things about? Who are we? Not only who am I, but how to be, to understand. Knowledge is power. Knowing is empowering. To create, there is all kinds of psychological substantiation about how being artful and creative is so healingful. So healingful. There's a quote in this book, Your Brain on Art, that says, aesthetics and arts are not rarefied. They are basic to human life, and they are basic to healing, to relieve suffering and healing, and it gets into that. So to create, to enjoy, to do, There's nothing wrong. I mean, to play, to connect, isolation, loneliness are serious spiritual psychiatric diseases, and the natural urge of the human spirit to transcend. And that fits our other brain, the spiritual brain model. But what I like about this, so we have these urges, the goals, the life goals. I mean, each of these can be filled out. They're not just theory. What meanings do we live by? Are we self-determinative in sufficient, creative, open ways, or are we selling ourselves into conformity?
Right.
And knowledge, not just knowledge in your technical field, but knowing knowledge about humanity, knowledge about the world, knowledge about what we, beyond our little scope of interest.
I'm loving this all laid out like this. The urges of the
Yeah,
human
isn't that
spirit. It
cool?
really
And
puts it into context to
yep,
really get in touch with those urges, with those passions that your longings
yes,
that you come in with for a reason.
absolutely,
For a reason to pursue
yes,
those things that you need them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, the goal of to enjoy is happiness. The goal of the urge to connect is love, And again, I've mentioned Paul Tillich, the philosophical theologian, very, very popular in the late 20th century in seminary instruction. Love is the connective, dynamic energy of the universe. The dynamic energy of the universe, connectivity to connectivity to connectivity, ever complex ways to connect. And of course, to transcend, the goal is unity. And you talked in similar terms in stage 4. But what I really like is the powers needed for the search. This not enough just to talk about the urges and the goals, but the how. What is important in terms of fundamental virtues, but operational virtues. Hope is not passive wishing. Hope is to go for what you hope for. Hope is active,
Right.
Courage. That's one of the firm virtues. Do you have the courage to live your integrity?
Mm.
And your way of being in the world as an agent of help and change.
Sure.
Curiosity. Have we lost that? One of the greatest gifts of our Creator is imagination, the capacity to create, to imagine and create, to imagine traveling under the water, creating a submarine, to imagine flying in the sky like birds, creating planes, to imagine the moon, and could we ever get there? Hello, July in 1969. These powers are not just, wouldn't it be nice? They really are powers that when we employ, we help to create magic in the universe, because that's what we are created for. We are created to be our Creator's stand-in, to make life happen well on the planet, in this life, on the earth, to bring heaven to earth. And too many religions have reversed it and said, the earth is a terrible place. Let's get the hell out of here. And we want to get to heaven.
Religions? Religions.
It can be. Just, and we distort the life of Jesus to simply mean a meal ticket to heaven. Yeah, and such reductionism is just,
it's
just so frustrating to this practical theologian. What I mean to say is the Christ consciousness, we becoming that and living that. So, and the Christ consciousness, one of the seminal aspects is connecting with people in love through caring.
Right.
Through caring. That's the Christ way, the caring. You could say it in the compassion, and then to transcend. Openness. Openness. I hope that people are open to hear your way of speaking, my way of speaking, and to consider it,
Yeah.
regardless of their religious convictions right now
Well, yeah, because I'm not
and
trying to tell you
practices.
how it is. This is
Yeah,
my way of seeing it, though.
right.
Right.
This is, yeah.
And understanding other people's,
Yes,
perception is key to your own personal growth.
yeah.
Otherwise you're stuck in your own world.
I think the ability to transcend, the urge to transcend, going backwards just a little bit to just a brief paragraph on that urge to transcend. There we are. There we are. So people can, don't think like here we are into is defined as the ability to pass beyond a human limit, to reach up as well as out, to let go as well as hold on, to be open to the unknown as well as the known. When we move beyond what we think of as human limits, we often transcend the everyday into an oceanic feeling of oneness. Fear, skepticism, or just being too busy frequently block this urge. I reread. Fear. I think we're a fear-based society. Skepticism. We have become like skeptical and nihilistic about, life itself sometimes. Or just being too busy block this urge. However, it can flood back when we decide to be open to life's opportunities. But I would say, are you open to life? Is your heart open to life one day at a time? When you wake up, do you have an urge to live this day well? One day at a time, to live this day well, and to get involved with other people, to get out and listen to the music of the spheres, Then boundaries fade into nothingness, and a sense of unity and oneness with nature, the universe, or God is experienced. Again, this is humanistic psychology, trying to merge with transcendentalism in a way that's, you might say, kind of baseline.
Yeah. Well, I love that. That's just beautifully put.
See, there's stuff from decades ago that still has almost like Back to the Future, recycle
Yeah,
stuff.
they were. I mean, not this stuff like this has been around for thousands and thousands of years, but culturally, they're ahead of their time. This wonderful.
And it's kind of interesting to take a step and think about people that we don't get along with very well, but we have to because we're at work together, or we're family together,
Right.
or we're neighborly associates or whatever. Yeah. Sometimes I think to take a step back and remember we're all children, we're all scared 2-year-olds. We all have these urges. We all have these urges.
Right. Except for me, I'm 2.5.
And how? Yeah, that's right. That's right. And and it's sort of, it's so easy to put barriers against each other to protect ourselves rather than build bridges to connect ourselves.
Mm.
And
Well, because that goes back to the vulnerability.
and I have to say, I am so awesomely appreciative of the power to connect in a way that I have, which is so much more empowering of others and so much more gratifying and meaningful to myself compared to some decades back,
Sure.
especially before the turn in my drinking phase. I turned from that path, the egoistic, self-defensive path, 47, close to 48.
Mm.
Yeah. And that was a major turn. But it's not like, oh no, I then went through all of the 4 stages you talked about. And dark night of the soul, the struggles of, who am I really? What is my authentic life? And then gifted to learn more. I would say it is only in the second half of my life that I have really begun to live the truth of all of this that we talk about. And yet I was a degreed social worker, a degreed cleric at the time. I mean, I was doing good things in society in as soon as I graduated from theology school. And my first job, I mean, it's not like I was an a-hole and was no good to anybody. No, I was active in community. I helped people. God the sacred used me well. But little did I realize that I was sort of on a stuck path, and a very complex picture of a life that on the surface could say, hey, you could look at the first 47 and 8 months of his life and say, hey, there's a lot of worthwhile things that he's done there. But such a major turn into quality and depth, and that, of course, a major turn was when I became engaged in two strong communities, one on the West Coast, one here, Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit. In its earliest stages, I became a student, a doctoral student. And then I also studied, I was also a doctoral student in psychology out west. And there was some interface of the two. But I didn't have it to do 2 degrees. So I had to finally end up choosing one. And I chose practical theology and spirituality because the sacred spirit led me that way. And when I knew I had to make a choice, couldn't just continue on both pathways. I remember in the doctoral class I was in couples counseling, couples therapy, the teacher was a Buddhist, and we really vibed together, as souls, not just as minds. And I was a student, he's the professor, a lot of respect and learning. But when I told him, I'm dropping out of this doctoral program after 2 years, it's been great, I've learned a lot, but I need to just get back to one track and complete that. And he was sad, and I was sad too. But it was the right decision, and also for other reasons, for other compelling reasons. But so all of my life, I've never been alone. God, the human one, has always been with me.
Well, did you realize that at the time, though, all along?
I said the right words about that. But it's one thing to know the narrative and talk about that, which we clerics can do well. We can do the narrative well, but have we the true experience? We can do the narrative to the doctrine well, the teaching well, the religious teaching. In other words, we can perform from narrative to doctrine, teaching people the Christian ethic, and then know the rituals and how to make people happy through meaningful, fun rituals, and to keep the administration of the building and things going. That's all good, legitimate stuff. But what about the experience of the sacred?
Right.
And in my awakening to understanding in-depth Trinity, the Trinity was like a true bridge to enlightenment.
Right. So when you're saying you're never alone, you're talking about, God is always there, essentially.
That's right.
Right. But as you went through life, I would imagine that it didn't always feel that way.
Of course.
Right.
Of course. It was peculiarly, while I talked and lived it on one level, it was like, but did I really feel it and operate from a core open sense of it? The ego was too much in the way of the I am.
Right.
My construction of the wheel. And the bicycle wheel has the casing of balls. It's the casing facilitates the turning of the wheel. And it's easy. And I liken this is ego consciousness. Ego consciousness.
Right.
Very functional. But it is not the determinator. It is a servant of the core self, the I am.
Right.
And when it is truly the I am, it is the I am in Christ, or the Christ in me. the human consciousness of God's consciousness integrated in a life where one feels it and lives it with passion every day. Passion. I said many sessions ago, I'm having a love affair with life, and a renewed love affair with life.
Right.
You know, and who knows how long it'll be, but I take it as the grace, one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And one day at a time, it's nice to be today out of the hospital with you here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I do not take that for granted. You know, this is the healing sacred at work. You know, and there is a book by, you know, there is an author of popular literature and medicine, and, you know, Bernie Siegel.
Yeah.
And he wrote what, love, peace, and healing. Yes, Love, Peace, and Healing was his first work. Love, Medicine, and Miracles is another one. But when I read Bernie Siegel's Peace, Love, and Healing, that's the exact title, Peace, Love, and Healing, a basic premise that was through these so-called miraculous cases, people who should have died, but who didn't. And a core aspect of that was their passion for the purpose of their life, for the meaning of their life. It wasn't their passion to save me, save me, save me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have time to die, God. Damn it. Let me out of here because I have things to do. I have too many important things to do in the world, God. So come on, can we have a deal? I have a passion for life. Please. I mean, I'm kind of making it over simple, but
Well,
that's
no,
what
I
Siegel
mean,
is saying.
That's it. It's not even just being in a
And
hospital
I've had
bed.
surgeries, I've had other challenges, and it's just passion for life. But that passion of life comes from the depth of living my life in the Trinity God, the Creator, the Christ, the Spirit, and in me, and I live in that, or in the Trinity. So, you know, and it's not just words. It is the essence of my living.
And well, absolutely. And it's not just, you know, when you're laying in a hospital bed. It's also when, it's not just when you're laying in a hospital bed, it is that, you know, when the chips are down, in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
is it, and when they've been down over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going, and you can be in a state of, God, please help me, or whining type of way as a child, like you're saying, a child kicking and screaming.
At least it's a way to connect with God.
Or no, damn it, this is not how this is going
it's an
down.
attempt,
Right?
but that's not where it goes down.
Or no, damn it, this is not how this is going down. Right? So, yes, I love that. It's like the awakening of the spirit within.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awakening to the spirit is awakening to life. And as Dostoevsky writes, as a line in War and Peace, as I understand it, to love life is to love God.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
But this is life in its depth, life in its significance, you know, life as God created it. This is not, you know, the materialistic, happy, supposed life of Madison Avenue, you know, products.
Right. Not that there's anything wrong with living, you know, comfortably.
We are material beings.
Fancy things. Yeah.
I'm grateful for my car.
But if that is the center of your world, then yeah. It's a good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. I mean, but that's the way of it too. That's not going against God. That is the divine prerogative that we have this life in this way to live.
Yep.
You know, to go through these things. It's the material representation of what's going on within the consciousness, where you know, where this ego voice is taking over. Which I always like to plug in. You know, my theories is that, you know, this is evolutionarily, this is our learning to master, you know, the prefrontal cortex. Essentially, the playground, the intellect is the playground for the ego.
Yeah.
And this is learning to master this maybe new piece of equipment. that humans or that beings on this planet, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
don't otherwise have.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
You know, we are remarkable creatures on two sides of the coin. Think about how we can fly and what we can do in the universe compared to when the Wright brothers began in early 1900s. What was it? Around 1905, they
Yeah.
could take a flapping piece of equipment
It's
and go
gone.
100 yards. Yay! And then within 65 years, we're on the moon. But also the rise of not only the natural sciences, but also the rise of the human sciences and human consciousness. You know, the 20th century is magnificent in some ways in terms of the manifestation of human creativity, human originality, you know, building lives of quality and, yes, more comfortable lives. You can be comfortable but also be very effective as a servant, you know, and the like. And yet we have the other side of the coin represented by this cryptic expression of Jesus. I think it's in the Gospel of John, Satan rules the world. And again, I say one of the most horrible manifestations of Satan ruling the world is not only war, but all of the resources that goes into preparation to destroy life. That's satanic.
Okay, but I'm going to say though, I'm going to say Satan.
The attack on life. We have an urge to affirm life, but then we use our human ingenuity a lot to attack life.
Satan ruling the world is not a bad thing. How do you like that for a statement? And
it's
here,
part of the total picture,
and
that's another discussion. But
yeah,
go ahead.
well,
say
no,
more,
I
please.
can say it more simply. Satan ruling the world is not a bad thing. It's simply it sets the context that this is the land of material, and it is the land where you recognize yourself first of all as the egoic form. You are an individual who is separate from the whole, and so in that you're in it for yourself. It allows the gateway for I lost the thread, but the devil, Satan being how did you say it? Satan is in charge of the material world. Satan is in charge of Earth.
Rules the world.
Right. What I'm saying is that this is not a bad thing. This is simply a description.
Where is the verse of Jesus quoted to say, Satan rules the world? John 16:11.
Okay, but this is simply a description. It's meant to put it into
ruler
context.
of this world. And look, it is part of the tapestry of existence. You know, the challenge of spirituality. This gets back to this urge to live. The satanic is the urge to destroy. You know, now I'm not naive and to say, you know, it's wrong to have a strong military. My son served in the Navy, in the nuclear submarine. I was proud of him because he believed in what Reagan said, peace with strength, you know. But where does it begin to tip over to so much resources goes into the fearing mongering machine? We are so preparing ourselves for military intervention and superpowers, putting so many dollars and resources into. And one of the appreciative statements that I heard from President Trump in his various visits in the Saudi Arabia trip recently was the moment when he said, "Stop this war." 5,000 young lives are gone every week. I'm paraphrasing. Just a simple statement. And this is expressive of the urge to live, to prevent war that just destroys schools, destroys temples, destroys bodies, destroys and kills people, of the satanic ruling the world, at least according to John 16:11. And I know the verse in context is not meant like this is it is we're helpless. No, it's kind of like a call. Do not accept this. Jesus went through his own temptation to give in to Satan's way of living, the satanic way of living. Yeshua had to face that satanic pull and say, no, this is not what my power is. My power, Jesus, is about life.
Well, that's
compassion, care.
That's where I would go with that. Is that it's just the idea. It's not out there. The out there is simply a projection of what's within the conscious mind. Within our consciousness
That is a part of it.
Okay, so
not the totality of it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I would disagree off the cuff without getting into it.
Yeah, we'd have to clarify that.
Yeah, the physical realm is a projection, is a reflection of the conscious realm, of the spiritual realm. And so what this is, this is, again, I'm not trying to get you to agree. I'm just saying this is how I see it. And so the material being, however you said it, Satan's realm, is because we allow this ego voice within us. And so this is what projects out. It doesn't have to be that way. This realm, just like we can, is that, as our life goes on and our consciousness gets cleaned up, you notice how our life gets better. And you transfer that into a larger scale. The world changes into something that, no, Satan doesn't rule any longer.
Yeah, I relate to what you're saying. But there is also an element that narrative does not adequately speak to. But I can't, in this context right now, clarify in my words what I mean. And it's not like being oppositional. It's just kind of like illuminating further what you're saying, because what you're saying is correct. It in a sense, and it's very important to understand, this is not, as you say, just an external agent getting the best of us. This is a projection of us. And so what it means is, in our doing this, we can stop and say, is this what we really should be doing?
Right.
Your narrative implies a capacity, a necessity to own this, not as something inevitable that we have to do because it's all out there. It's in us. It's maybe one of the aspects is to look at why are we so inclined to project our fears this way.
Well, yeah. From the movie The Matrix, this is not, I didn't just come up with this. It's just when you start to think in these ways, you find other people who also thought in these ways. And like The Matrix, my favorite example is when he goes in to see the Oracle and the girl is bending the spoon. And she goes, what the trick to this is you are the spoon. That's the concept there. Is that I feel that as soon as we start, maybe it's justified to call things out, of course, but when we have to be careful not to separate ourselves from them, because then we become the victim of them. We become disempowered to making any change, but instead we can realize that we can recognize that we are what we're looking at.
My post-hospital brain is not the best, but one meaningful way
I feel like I'm picking on your post-hospital brain.
I approach. No. We may have, a little bit combative narrative. That's perfectly fine. I go back to the model of the universe based on the idea of energy, information, and form. This is the quantum understanding. All of existence are different energies, a structure of different kinds of energies. We, as humans, have been created and gifted to connect to those energy and transform them to understand and create forms. part of the energy lattice work of creation includes the energies that are benevolent and the energies that are malevolent, and we appropriate those. We connect, and then we connect to the malevolent energies. Is it surprise then that we create forms of hostility and separation and violence? Because it's almost like in the structure of the universe, there is a for life energies and against life energies.
Yeah.
And it's like the challenge is put upon us. Which of these energies are you going to tap into and form from? If you tap into the energy of your anger and resentment at people who hurt you, it's, so the idea of malevolent energies that we internalize and then allow ourselves to be ruled by and form, it is in part an external malevolent energy, but that we have to personally also appropriate it to make it happen.
Yeah.
The same thing with benevolent energies.
Well,
we have to make the Christ consciousness happen in reality.
I think there's not really an argument. It is combative dialogue is great for podcasting. You get more audience, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's not. It's only a matter of perception. So I'm thinking of the tree, the leaf. The leaf sees another leaf. Well, wait a second. The leaf sees another leaf, and it thinks that's another leaf. But when it backs its awareness into the tree, it realizes it's the whole tree. So it's both leaves. Or a matter of perception would be if you're that leaf and a bug lands on you and you know this bug is going to give you some sort of disease, that's a bad energy, relatively speaking. However, if you back out and you look at the forest, you recognize that the forest keeps itself healthy and alive and moving in the right direction, and everything that happens within the forest is for the benefit of the forest.
Yeah, when you put it in the ecological context, of course, as, partly an ecological minded theologian, I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a matter of where are you putting your awareness into a character, or are you putting it at the level of the divine? Because there is no, at the level of God, there is no opposition. There is the whole. There is the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the left and the right. There is the whole. And they're in a duality situation. This is how it works out. It doesn't work otherwise.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm picking on your post-hospital brain.
No, I'm trying to incorporate and understand what you're saying. And it rings. It rings in my mind. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is yeah, right, but
yeah, right, but
and I can't quite today, have sort of a clarifying illumination to get at, pretty nuanced, subtle distinctions that don't oppose what you're saying.
Yeah.
But in a sense, illuminate it further, because I'm not satisfied with your saying it as the whole thing.
Right, but now at another perspective, perhaps then, maybe to help that other view out, is that, there are subtle energies within my consciousness that I can choose to tune into, that are most certainly what you would call subjectively negative, because they're not going to be good for me or you or anybody else around me. And so, like the judgment, for instance, is that more? There's energy that you. I'm losing how we were talking about it, but I'm just suggesting it's a perceptual thing, but at a certain level, it's not.
A way to get at, my qualifying yes, but is that it isn't just a matter of the perceptual. The perceptual, yes, it is the dynamic operation of how the things impact us. but there is an externalized agency factor in it as well. That is not just the perception, that there is something there that leads to the perception.
Yeah, maybe perception was the wrong word. It's more. No, it's perception, but I don't know. We use perception in ways that are defeating what my point was. Is
Yeah.
Are you the character or are you the divine? Is what I'm getting.
And we are
About
in
time.
that both and.
Yeah, both end.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are we are mind, body, spirit. We are creature. We are a cognitive human,
Mhm.
and we are spirit. And what a mix when you think about it. And that is what leads to, I think, us this sort of easy temptation to oversimplifying, because it can be kind of quite confusing when you try to blend the fact that we are animal, as Suzuki writes about, an ecological psychologist, therapist. We are certainly cognitive creatures, as this wonderful world. I mean, your pod studio, I mean, this is a cognitive, creative. You're part of a creative venture.
Mhm.
This is so human, but this is also so spiritual,
Yeah.
because it's the energy of this is not to just be out there as two guys talking. Are we hot? No, this is spiritual in the sense that we want to convey and assist the spiritual world that I would say is codified in the expression integral spirituality. And that's something I suggest we talk about next time. And it's in these, and I will bring in more of what I mean by the integral spirituality.
Wonderful. We will do that.